Well, hello, and welcome to a very scary episode of Honey Horror. Today we're talking about a haunting in the attic. But before we begin, I was wondering if you could do me a little favor. Maybe give this a like, a share. If you're into it, you could subscribe. And if you absolutely hate it, you could always tell me all about it in the comments below. Anyways, let's get into it. My parents, my baby sister, and I had been living in this old two-story home for as long as I could remember. I think the house was built in 1935. It was beautiful, but it creaked and settled often. So much so that when I had friends over, they would joke the next day at school that I lived in a haunted house. Up until the age of 13, my sister and I had shared a room on the first floor, which was fine for the most part. My sister and I got along well. Part of the surprise on my 13th birthday was that I would get my own room, one fully decorated to my liking. I was ecstatic. My mom, my friends, and I went shopping the day of my birthday, picking out everything from bedding to wall art. Once we got home, my friends and I had the pleasure of carrying everything up 2 flights of stairs. When we walked into my room for the first time, my friends were shocked by the size and how empty it was. I explained that at one point, it was a storage room for all of my dad's workout equipment. And yes, I mean storage, because he visited that room maybe twice a year. We got to work on setting everything up. It took a couple of days to get settled. About 3 days after my birthday, I was finally able to start sleeping in the room. And that's when it all began. The first night, I went to bed at a normal time, about 10 p.m. I woke up randomly in the middle of the night, but couldn't figure out why. I picked up my phone to check the time, and it was 3 a.m. I groaned, because I had to be up in 3 hours for school. I flipped over in bed, facing the wall, and pulled the covers up over my shoulders. Despite being wrapped up, it was freezing cold, almost as if I had left a window open, but I knew that none were. I basically tossed and turned all night, and when I finally fell asleep, I had an awful dream that a woman in a black cloak was standing over me watching me sleep. The next morning at breakfast, my mom asked me about my night, and I told her everything. She shrugged it off and said it sounded like I was getting used to my new room, and I agreed. Later that night, I drifted off to sleep earlier than normal, around 9 p.m. I was hoping to catch up on some sleep, but no such luck. It felt like as soon as I drifted off, I was jolted awake by what sounded like scratching noises. At first, I couldn't tell where they were coming from, but then I got up and walked over to my bedroom door. The scratches sounding like they were coming from the attic, which was positioned in the hallway right above the door to my bedroom. I stared up at the door to the attic and listened intently. Though I was shaking and terrified, I couldn't move or look away. The scratching sound grew louder and louder, so much so that it didn't sound like raccoons or squirrels rummaging around. It sounded more like metal claws being dragged across the floor. And then, the attic door creaked open, just barely. Suddenly, I had the ability to move again and bolted down the stairs to my parents' room. I woke them up and frantically explained what I had heard. Both of them looked at me groggily and told me that it most likely is just a raccoon or something trapped up there, and that they would have to check it out the next day. I spent the night sleeping on the couch. The next day, my parents had a pest control service come out and take a look in the attic. To their surprise, there was no evidence of wildlife, no droppings or anything. I asked if they saw any scratches on the flooring or the door, and they said no. Once the reps had left, my parents told me not to worry, that I might have just had a bad dream, or maybe I heard something on the roof. I felt a little bit better, but still couldn't explain the door opening in front of my eyes, which ultimately is what caused me to run down and wake them up. That didn't seem like a dream at all. Despite my fears, I had decided to sleep upstairs again, but this time I left my bedside lamp on. I know, this doesn't do anything, but it did make me feel better. I was able to fall asleep about an hour after laying in bed. But then once again I was jolted awake. This time, I stared at the doorway to my bedroom, which I had left open. As my eyes adjusted, I peered out into the hallway and listened closely to the scratching sound again. Just like before, it started off quiet and gradually grew into a loud, metallic, scratching sound. I continued to stare at the doorway, wide-eyed and terrified, and suddenly I hear the slow, creaking sound of the attic door opening. My breath catches in my throat. It wasn't like before. Instead of just opening slightly, I heard the door creak on and on as it opened fully. Then I heard a loud thud, followed by the metal scratching again. I see a dark, cloaked figure appear in my doorway, and as I stare frozen, I watch as a tall, black, cloaked shadow fills my doorway, its arms lifting into the air. Suddenly, I can make out a long, slender handle and the light hitting the edge of a blade as an axe is lifted into the air. I had just inherited a house from my great aunt. To be honest, I didn't know her very well, but my parents explained that I was close with her when I was a toddler. Once we moved and I grew up, I spoke to her during the holidays only. I was told by my family that towards the end of her days, she started to act very strange. I'm not sure if it was due to old age, memory concerns, or what, but my dad told me that she would call at odd hours and go on and on about how something that lived in the house would be upset with her, moving or cleaning things. My dad said that it was a coping mechanism after her late husband had passed. He was a grumpy man who often fussed if things weren't in a very specific order. Anyways, inheriting this house really couldn't have come at a better time. I had just wrapped up school and had begun looking for a job as a therapist. I was excited and nervous all at once, but elated to know that my housing situation had been sorted for me. My parents and friends helped me move everything in on the first day. Once night fell, I was exhausted and said my goodbyes to everyone. It was nice of everyone to help get everything in the door, but now I had to deal with maneuvering around a large pile of boxes in between the living room and the kitchen. There were a few boxes of collectibles that I knew I wouldn't be opening anytime soon, so I decided I could move them into the attic for now. I teeter on the stairs, lifting up each box one at a time. Afterwards, I lift the door and stand there trying to catch my breath. Now I have a bit of room to move around, I think to myself. As I walk into my bedroom preparing to make my bed and crash for the night, I hear what sounds like the boxes moving across the floor. I walk back into the hallway, where the majority of the boxes had been left, and they were all as I had left them. I rub my eyes, assuming I am more exhausted than I realize. I turn to go back into my room, but I hear the boxes being moved around once more. Now I realize the sound is coming from the attic. Ugh, I think to myself, I bet there's some wild animal that made its home up there, and now they're destroying my collectibles. I pull the attic door open and begin walking up the stairs, but as I do, I hear something shatter. Oh no. I rush the rest of the way up the stairs, only to find one of the boxes completely turned over and one of my glass figurines shattered. I look everywhere but don't see a single sign of an animal or an intruder. I'm too tired for this nonsense and walk down the stairs to grab a broom and sweep up the figurine. As I rummage around for the broom, I hear another noise. This time it's a loud thump, and I look out of the kitchen and see that one of the boxes is now laying at the bottom of the attic stairs. Now I'm freaking out. What sort of animal has the strength to lift a box and throw it down the stairs? And how are they not scared off by me going up there? I pick up my phone to call my dad and tell him what's going on, but rather than ringing, my cell phone just clicks over and over as if it's trying to connect. I look down at the phone and see that I have great reception. I'm so confused. But then I suddenly remember my dad mentioning that the landline my aunt had will be left on for another month. I go over to it and pick it up, dialing my dad's number. At first, I hear a short ring, then white noise, and the same clicking. I slam the phone down on the receiver while my heart races. What is going on? Next thing I know, the lights in the house begin to flicker. It's storming outside, and the house is rather old, so this isn't surprising, but due to everything that had just happened, I was panicking. I decided to try sending out a few texts, so I make my way from the kitchen back to my bedroom, and as I pass by the attic, I look up to see some sort of black mass pass over the entry, followed by another box being flung down the stairs. This time the box missed me by only a few inches, but I had had enough. I grabbed my car keys and ran out into the storm. I decided to sell the house not long after that. I moved in an apartment near my work. Luckily, I wasn't stressed about finances at all after the house was sold, but I did periodically get updates from my parents. After the first couple bought the house, they moved out in less than a month. Then, another family bought it and moved out within 2 months. I tried looking for news articles or reports surrounding the house, but nothing came up. Ultimately, after multiple people had just up and moved, word got out. It has been about 5 years since I initially moved in, and that house sits vacant to this day. Spooky. Thank you so much for listening to Honey Horror. If you liked these original tales, please feel free to subscribe. Comment, let me know what you think. And of course, like and share. As always, have a spooky day.